Hey everyone, it's Lauren. The thing that all podcasters dread happened to us for this episode. We had some technical difficulties. So basically, every once in a while, not very often, but every once in a while, specifically at the beginning and the end of the episode, you're going to hear kind of like a robotic distortion that is attached to all three of our voices. And there's no way for me to clean it up in post. We apologize. Nobody's perfect. Especially technology. I should have triple checked, I suppose. But you know what? You live and learn. So this is only our 6th episode. There's probably going to be some things down the road that happen too. We're going to move on and deal with it the best we can. So hopefully you could still enjoy the episode. And cheers. This episode of Liquor and Literature will be covering a true crime case with depictions of physical abuse, sexual assault, sexism, classism, racism, abuse of power, human trafficking, and murder. We strive to discuss these issues in ways that will not alienate or suppress others, but will be covering themes that may not be suitable for children. Also, cuss words are a part of our regular vocabulary and drinks will be had. So keep that in mind if you are sensitive to liquored up loudmouths. Welcome to Liquor and Literature. We are a podcast, a book club, and a happy hour. My name is Lauren.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Sam.
And by this point, you probably know what the fuck's going on with us. But we basically, once a month, pick a book to read. And then we talk about the book, but also talk about, we have a drink pairing that we have with it. And we also have an author background and any media movie adaptations that go with it. So...
And a delicious meal.
Oh, yeah, and a delicious meal. Sorry, Amber.
Not from boxes this time.
Yes. Well, you
said
know
with
what?
Sarcasm.
It's okay. Like we said, off air, going to the store is still work. So I think it counts.
You still have to deal with people, man.
And we learned from our first episode, we got to eat before we do this because it gets rough.
Y'all couldn't tell probably, but
already
I was out of commission for most of the first episode. Lauren's just magic, and it made me seem like I was there the whole time.
I was
Magic
very
editing.
impressed.
I was too.
Magic of editing.
Amber looked at me like, what are we gonna do? I'm like, let's just keep on going. I'll figure it out. And I did.
I was passed out literally on the floor.
For probably the last at least third of that episode.
Yeah.
But
It was
then
impressive. We learned not to
You
drink
came back
so
at the
much.
end, so
Yeah.
it's okay. We're
Well,
giving away
some
all
of
our
us.
secrets, dudes. Let's not do that.
Some of us
It's
learned.
funny.
Yeah.
Some of us learned.
I ain't
I'm
got it.
already drunk, guys.
You know,
I ain't got
last month was my time to shine. So
It's true, Lauren.
Now it's Amber's time.
Lauren pulled me down into the ground
Yes,
in the cold.
I did a love jump. That's what I did. I do that to people when I'm drunk.
She
And
does.
I was unexpecting it and was trying to, I guess, my car door was open as
Yes.
she jumped on me, and I had to mom arm
So I didn't bash my
her.
face.
Yeah, so she didn't bash into my car door, and then we ended up on the ground. It was
I woke up the
ridiculous.
next day with a hurt ankle and I didn't know why. And then you told me what I did. I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that now.
It was good times.
But I digress. So anyway, just a heads up. We are talking about a book, so there will be spoilers. So, if you're
We
fine
are
with
good to
spoilers,
know.
that's fine. But if you want to read this book beforehand, you can. So, speaking of this book, we are reading Daughter of the White River this month.
Which was a Sam pick.
I was going to say, it's a Sam pick. Why did you pick this book, Sam?
So I'm a big true crime fan, and one of the podcasts that I listen to is Morbid. Shout out to Ash and fucking my brain's not working right now.
Elena?
Yeah!
I've heard about them through the other podcast that I listen to, and I keep wanting to listen, but I haven't gotten there yet. I listen to Mr. McBallin. Shout out to them.
I also like him as well.
I love his voice. And listen to us plug in other podcasts.
Plug,
Yeah,
plug,
so
plug.
Ash and Elena are cousins, and they do a true crime podcast called
know that.
Morbid. And it's actually really cool because Elena is a autopsy tech.
Oh,
So she has really
badass.
great insight into
Oh,
the body mechanics of certain crimes.
interesting.
So it turns out that she didn't pick this book just because she looks just like our dear sweet friend Helen.
Which I did not even...
She didn't know until
no
Lauren
idea.
and I were like, she looks like her.
No, you pointed it out. I had not
pointed
even
out,
read
Lauren
the book
was
yet.
like, what? And then she looked at it and she was like, oh, yeah, she does.
And then I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And then she looked and she was like,
oh, I kind of do.
yeah.
The main character in our story today is a distant relative of Sam. So
Not really.
I don't think really, but they share a striking resemblance.
yes, they look very similar. Also, stereotypical female millennials. Of course, we all love true crime. So we had to fit one of these in here. There are probably going to be more.
Oh,
but
there
I'm
will
glad
be
that
more.
we're- You know, in our 6th episode, we're tackling a true crime case because fuck yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But I picked it because they did an episode over her, and this was one of the books that Elena pulled a lot of the information from. So I had written this down literally 2 years ago, and I was like, I want to read this book, and I just never got around to it. And then I was like, oh, this is a perfect time to read this book. I just thought it was a really interesting story. She's a very strong woman, and it's like she grew up in an area I never really had any idea that people were living in houseboats. Like when I think of houseboats, like riverboats, I think of Louisiana.
yeah.
I never would have thought of Arkansas, which is just, a hop, skip, and jump. neighbor to our south.
Yes.
And actually the White River, it actually goes through Missouri.
Yeah.
And it goes up near Branson and
Yes.
Theodosia. And Theodosia is about 2.5 hours from where we are. So really,
we should have taken a field trip.
I know we honestly could have.
If we would have had time.
If we would have had time, and the fact that because of the Army Corps of Engineers, didn't made that dam, and actually it's Bull Shoals. So they made that dam, and which caused that lake, and it just messed up the whole entire flow of the White River.
Things, yep.
So that doesn't really exactly exist anymore where Helen was, but yeah, so she's badass, and I was just very enthralled with her as a person, and I enjoyed that episode of their podcast a lot. So maybe we can link it or something.
Yeah, I'm actually going to talk about it in the media section.
Sweet.
So, because that's how I heard about it was from you.
So it's within the Depression era. So I guess we can just go on into the drink pairing that I did. This is a little ditty that I made up myself. It's nothing too crazy, but I like to make things up myself. And now that my restaurant is closed that I used to bartend at, this is probably what I'll just do from now on if I'm feeling fancy.
You're the podcast bartender, so you do what you want to do, girl.
So I don't have an official name for this, but I think I'm gonna call it something like Riverboat Summer.
I like that.
It tastes yum, and it does taste like sitting on the river in the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I thought I would hate this because it's got moonshine in it.
Well, yeah. Sam should tell us what the recipe is.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
It's basically a strawberry moonshine Arnold Palmer, which I always feel like I say that really weirdly. Arnold Palmer.
It's got too many R's and L's.
Arnold Palmer.
Arnold Palmer.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I sound like Arnold
Get to the
Schwarzenegger or something. Arnold Palmer. I don't know.
That's great.
The recipe is 2.5 ounces of Old Smoky strawberry moonshine, which is moonshine by name, but I want to put it in quotation marks because moonshine to me is the shit that you get out illegally from the woods.
Lighter fluid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, commercial moonshine. So 2.5 ounces of Old Smoky strawberry moonshine. It is a 1/2 ounce of Cointreau, which is orange liqueur. 4 healthy dashes of Fee Brothers rhubarb bitters. And then you stir that over ice till it's nice and chilled. And then you fill your glass with a third. So a third of your glass is going to be unsweetened iced tea. Or you could put sweet tea in it if you really wanted to. I feel like it's sweet enough without it. And then a third of a glass of lemonade. I used Simply lemonade because honestly, their stuff's always so good.
It's simply the best.
So then, yeah, you pour in your stirred in alcoholic beverage part into your Arnold Palmer. And then I just garnished it with a lemon slice and some sliced up strawberries in it. It'd be good to add like some strawberry puree or something. But honestly, I was too lazy to do that. So that is our drink. I feel like it's very refreshing. It doesn't have a burn at all from the moonshine, but it's still 2.5 ounces of just moonshine.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised because I can't even taste it. Maybe my taste buds are like zapped from drinking too much alcohol.
No,
but like,
they're not, Lauren. And now let me tell you why. Do you remember?
It's pretty smooth, I'm not gonna lie.
Amber's gonna bring up stuff from the past. Okay, go ahead, go on.
Do you remember?
I do.
When I was
Do you remember
drinking? Drinking. Do you remember the time you fed me drinks and Lauren had some Polish
No.
moonshine?
You're not getting the info correct. My sister Ellen and her boyfriend Dan had the Polish moonshine, not me.
Yes.
It was called Spiritus.
Yeah, and it was like, how much proof was it? Because it was
I don't know.
Dumb.
It was. We drank that over Halloween.
It was like 90 proof.
She was dressed as Frankenfurter.
I was. People thought I was a man, and I thought I could dance. And let me tell you, friends, that when I think I can dance, I am not just intoxicated. I am drunk. I would have been fine if you'd have let me sleep. Instead, I vomited violently. The next day, I had to get on a train to go back home.
Good old Amtrak.
For 6 hours on a train with a woman with a screaming baby who kept screaming, "Shut up, baby!" I stuck my hungover head against the window thinking, good God, this is hell.
Yeah, that's when I lived back in Chicago. I definitely did a hungover Amtrak ride once, and it was not fun.
It's not
and
fun.
I got rained on, so I was in damp clothes the whole time. So.
Ew.
Friends, this is where we would like to insert the PSA. Drink responsibly. Don't drink and drive. Hydrate well. Don't go anywhere if you are thoroughly drunk. Like we already are this evening.
But we are safe and sound at my home.
I will be sleeping here
Yes.
before I go
You probably
anywhere.
should.
I
Yes.
do not drive. So, PSA, don't drink and drive. And for our sober listeners,
Yeah, so what's
who
our...
we are incredibly proud of. Good for you.
What
That
is
was a
our...
really long segue.
Yes, what is our sober drink?
Sam.
So basically, you could take the strawberry lemonade or raspberry lemonade or whatever the fuck lemonade you want, or just plain lemonade if you really wanted to, and go half and half with your iced tea of choice.
Arnold Palmer.
Arnold Palmer.
It's a good float trip drink, that's for damn sure.
Indeedly doodle.
Very much so.
All right.
Do we want moonshine facts?
Oh,
Yeah, let's try
Yeah.
moonshine facts.
Let's
A
do
little
some
bit- a
moonshine
little bit of
facts.
moonshine facts. So I guess moonshine was originally first referenced in the 15th century. Originally in England, Scotland, Ireland. They were the ones originally making moonshine. It's typically just considered an illegal grain alcohol that's high proof. It's clear typically.
Could it make people blind?
So
Or dead?
Yeah,
Blind and dead.
They used to say that moonshine would make you go blind, and that's why they call it white lightning, because you would actually get flashes of light in your eyes. And the reason why people would actually go blind, it was because it wasn't distilled correctly.
Right.
And so it had methanol in it still.
Oh.
So
Oof.
that's actually what caused people to go blind. But yeah, so they would take their grain and they would add sugar and make a mash out of it, and they would then distill that with hot water, and it would go through your copper still, the lines and whatnot, and the distillate they would then mix with some water, but not a whole lot, because then it would reduce the proof. So it has to be a higher proof to be moonshine. Actually, the whiskey rebellion started in Pennsylvania, but it was actually really over moonshine and not whiskey. So that was like the first big well-known thing about moonshine in the United States was actually in Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It was all over taxes.
Of course. Not surprised about that, actually.
Yeah. And it's illegal in most states still to make moonshine, but I know in some states, Missouri is one of them, that you can actually apply for a permit. There's only so many permits they give out in a year, and it's regulated by the state still. But you can make and sell your moonshine that way.
That makes sense, because I've had, the last time I had moonshine, well, actually, the last time I had moonshine, someone had made it. But the time before that, it was at someone's wedding, and it was in Missouri.
Yeah.
Somebody
St.
was
James.
making something out in the woods that my grandparents used to hang, like, out behind my grandparents' house. Might have been moonshine. More likely it was meth.
Which one's more fun? Moonshine.
Moonshine's more fun. Friends don't try meth. Friends don't let your friends try meth.
They also always pick a spot with like a natural spring because it makes the moonshine
water
better. It makes it's definitely more pure. It makes the distillate like cleaner.
Nice.
Yeah. So
Lauren's
Also-
face there was like very cool.
it was like a light bulb. Bing!
I was like, yeah.
Wow.
Well, also, something I thought about, is it called moonshine because they had to do it like at nighttime so they didn't get caught?
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah.
Did you guys ever see the shoes they had to, like, that they used to wear?
No?
Do you know why they call them bootleggers?
Oh, because they're really high up or something?
So used to, somebody got the wise idea to take the hooves off of cows and attach them to the bottom of shoes so that when they walked in the
It looked like a
fields,
cow?
It looked like a cow
Dude.
to kind of cover up their tracks so that people wouldn't think that there was people walking through there and wouldn't be onto the stills.
See, I was thinking more of the aspect of that they used to call trunks of your car the boot, like they do in England. And
There's
Europe.
so many different reasons.
Yeah.
You know,
Probably.
You know,
But
there's always different,
Yeah,
I don't remember where I
5
found
different
that
reasons
out.
why something's
I'm sure
called
there's
that.
a 15 million.
Yeah. And on that note, Amber, do you want to take off with the author section of
Of course
this?
I do. Let me tell you all about the author. Denise White Parkinson was born, raised, and educated in Arkansas. She attended college on scholarship and is a 1986 graduate of Hendrix College in Conway.
Are you literally just reading it from the book?
We'll talk about it. Her career.
Calling her out.
We'll get there. Her career in journalism includes writing for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Arkansas Times, Mature Arkansas News Monthly, Little Rock Free Press, Encyclopedia of Arkansas History and Culture, Memphis Flyer, and Cooper Young Lamplighter. Since 2008, she has been the lead writer for Hot Springs Life and Home magazine.
Woo!
Girl, get it.
Mm-hmm.
She resides in Hot Springs with her husband and children, where her proudest achievement is founding Hot Springs Area Community Gardens Network. Denise White Parkinson, you deserve better than just the back of this book. Please talk about yourself more. We are interested in your history. We want to know about you. Just like you wanted to know about our good friend, Miss Helen Spence, we want to know more about you. And I had a really hard time coming up with the biography.
The author background, yeah.
Yes, for you.
Well, you know what's funny that you say that she doesn't talk about herself that much, though, because I feel like she did put a lot of herself in this book, though, because I forget exactly, I don't know if she lived there, but she, like, visited family there a lot or
grew
something.
up there, I think. is what
Yeah,
she-
and then,
Yeah.
like, moved away when she was a child. And that's one thing I really liked about this book is the way she described everything.
I did find some actual interviews with our good friend Elsie.
Yeah.
So a lot of this book is her talking about some of the conversations that she had with this friend of Helen's, Elsie Brown, who kind of just knows a lot about the history. And so he talked a lot about the history to Miss Denise.
I'm glad you brought up Elsie because we're going to go through this in, the chapters. Organized way. So in the preface, we kind of get introduced to Denise and her history on the, White River and shit like that. And she kind of mentions the dam that you were mentioning.
Bullsholes.
How, like, it was this very lively community. And then, I forget when, details, but the government basically built this dam that kind of, like, rerouted the river, so all these river people did not have like the livelihood that they once had.
And it also changed the temperature of the water, so the mussels that they were harvesting for the pearl buttons and stuff, which was what they made their livelihood out of, they were no longer able to live in those waters because the temperature was different.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess they manufactured like a majority of the buttons made during like the war.
From they made like from the pearls from the
not from the
mussels,
from
they
the
made
shells.
buttons. Yeah, shells, something from the mussels.
Yeah, the mussel shell. It's like think of mother of pearl, like it's the actual oyster shell type thing, or the abalone. It's the shell. It's same thing.
Yeah. It was in the 1960s when they built the dam. Also, there's like a bunch of different little towns in the area, and she mentions a whole bunch of them throughout the book. But one of them that caught my eye was called Possum Grape, which I thought was a fucking adorable.
Possum Grape.
I was like, I want to live in Possum Grape, but it probably has 5 people living in it. But like, I still want to live there. Probably more possums than people, but I'm okay with that. You know.
So when I was reading this book, I was at work one day, and the travel tech that came in for the night shift, he's from Arkansas.
Oh.
And he saw the book and was like, is that about Helen Spence? And I was like, yes. And I'm like, So apparently he was actually from, I think it's St. Charles. He didn't say specifically, but wherever she's buried, he's from.
Which is St. Charles.
Yeah. So I saw that it was St.
Spoiler
Charles.
alert.
Yeah. So
Spoiler alert, Helen dies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, this is from the 30s.
It is a true crime thing.
In a book from the 1930s, it turns out Helen dies.
Yeah. So it's just kind of, interesting to see that she's still known and talked about like in the area. So that was pretty cool. And especially since I'm like, this is literally the first time I've met you.
Yeah, that's really cool. Definitely like a small world thing. And it, like you said, she's kind of legendary around probably the entire state of Arkansas, I feel like.
Probably.
Before we get to Helen's family, let's talk about the river people.
Yeah.
Because they are their own unique community, I feel like. There's also
River Justice.
I might not.
I thought about naming that drink River
Oh,
Justice.
yeah.
You should have named it River Justice.
River Justice.
It's too nice though.
We've renamed it. It's renamed. It's River Justice.
River Justice.
It's just the drink you want on the river.
Yeah. But yeah, they're their own little community of people that they literally live on the lake. They work on the lake. They go to school on the lake. They do hobbies on the lake. All the things they live in boats, and they have their own river justice.
Yeah,
which basically means
tooth
they
for
take
tooth,
the law. They
eye
don't
for
go to
eye.
the police. They take the law in their own hands. Like there was some story. I think it was in this thing that I'm going to mention later in the media episode or media portion, but it was something about they were playing a poker game and some guy was being a dick, and so I forget what happened, but some kerfuffle happened, then they kicked the guy out, and they're like, river justice. It's like
River Justice.
They just take the law into their own hands.
And good for them.
It's easier that way.
In that way.
And they realize who are dicks and who are not. So they're going to kick the dicks out and keep all the wholesome people.
Maybe
it's everyone just trying to get by, you know.
Maybe river justice is a little more swift than drylander justice.
Yeah.
Drylanders.
So why don't we talk about Helen's background a little bit?
All right.
Take it away, Sam.
Oh, okay. So,
get off your phone!
Helen Spence was a young woman that grew up on the White River. Her family lived in a houseboat that used to be an old riverboat that was pretty much common along their neighbors and other family. She was the oldest. No, she was one of the young. She was
second child.
There was the second child. She was the second child.
The second child.
Her oldest sister, she had some physical deformities to where she couldn't walk and things like that.
I think she had polio, didn't she?
I don't think they ever
in the book. It didn't
said
say, but then I was listening to
polio.
a podcast and they referenced polio.
It's possible, but she also had learning disabilities. She was
Oh.
About
little,
the time for that, though.
yeah. I mean, So
True.
it's possible that she could have had polio and also had learning
Yeah.
disabilities. Or maybe it was just like birth complications that caused it to.
Many things. We're being born on a river.
Yeah, but there's no fucking doctors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's just like a mishmash of different people living on these houseboats. They do a lot of bartering. Helen's mom had passed.
When she was really young.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so her dad had remarried, and she actually seemed to like her stepmom.
Yeah, they're pretty close. Also, her dad's name was Cicero, which every time I read that, I just thought of Chicago. Cicero.
Me too.
I like the name Cicero.
Same.
Cell
I
block
do too.
tango. Cell block tango. But
I
I
like
like
it.
the name Cicero. And then her stepmom's name was
Ada.
Ada, yeah.
Yeah.
Ada.
So they kind of just like did their life, you know, they did the mussel shells, and her dad was also really well known and well liked on the river because he did a lot of hunting and trading, and he was just really skilled in a lot of different things.
Sounded like he ran a trading boat, but like, did you maybe get the sense that he traded more than goods?
Oh, most definitely.
Okay.
I feel like that's a pretty like common
thing at that
yeah.
It sounded like he was a bootlegger.
I
I don't
think
know if he was a bootlegger though,
Yeah.
because
Well, there was that scene. You guys remember that scene where the sheriff went out to talk to Cicero? And
Oh, yeah, he
Helen
gave him
had
some-
$300 like tucked up in her little like garter or whatever. She had it hidden in her sock or under her dress or something. And she's like, "It's my daddy's money." And Elsie was like, "Oh, that's a lot of money." And I was thinking like, I feel like her dad trades
yeah, I didn't even
something
make.
that's not legal.
I did not make the connection of him giving her the money because the police was getting there. I thought she just said he gives it to me for safekeeping, like. So I don't know if he purposely gave it to her because the police, because he had a pretty
Yeah.
good relationship with
He
Elsie's dad.
Yeah, he seemed
did.
like he was pretty chill.
But he was still the law.
And also, though, we're fast forwarding a little bit, but Helen ends up marrying a guy for very briefly, and she ended up leaving
She
him
said
because
she'd
he was a
never be with no
bootlegger.
bootleggers.
Oh, so maybe it's just.
But then the whole thing that goes down with all of that, we'll talk about it.
Anyway,
We'll talk about speculation.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because I always speculated that maybe there was more going on. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
So I would like to say I really liked the relationship that Cicero had with Helen.
Mm-hmm.
You do.
He relied on
Seemed like a
her
good dad.
a lot, and then like there is a certain part in the introduction of this book that I was like, I like him.
Yes.
So
Me too.
Cicero shared his knowledge of the river with his daughter, teaching her as he would a son. Helen learned to shoot a pistol as well as she could sew, and to sew as well as she could catch and gut a fish. I feel like there's definitely something about teaching your children, no matter what sex they are,
Life
things
skills.
to stay alive,
yeah.
life skills, whatever. And I love that he wasn't like, "You're a girl, you can't do this."
Yeah.
Because
You
it's
must
definitely
sew,
during a time where that was gender
cook and
roles were
clean.
very stiff, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know that it was this big of a thing though, on like in the country and in the.
Because you had to survive.
You had
Everyone
to do
had
what
to
you
do
had
their
to do.
share. You know. So
And I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
And honestly, like a lot of the girls were probably more tomboy-y because they were living in the wilderness their entire lives, and they didn't have any way to be like girly girls, really. You know, not that's a bad thing. I'm just
Which I
saying.
dig it.
They probably were like, "Oh yeah, I just walk through the swamps all day and pick up frogs and stuff." It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just normal for them. I would have loved that life, you know?
Right? So I think he was great. I mean, he had a good relationship with pretty much everybody. He was deferred to on the great hunting, fishing spots, and I think he also had like trapped, so he did furs and things like that. So I think he's just kind of pretty much a well-rounded guy in like regards to what he offered the community.
Yes, yeah. And that's a good segue because he had a really good relationship with the sheriff or the deputy sheriff for Arkansas County. I said Arkansas. Arkansas County. Arkansas County. His name was Lemuel. No, that's Elsie's name? What was Elsie's dad's name? Elsie's dad was the sheriff.
Was it the same name?
Oh, yeah. Lemuel Cressy Jr. Brown. I forget. They gave him a nickname, though. Like
Lim. They called him
Sheriff
Lim.
Lim or something. Yeah, Sheriff Lim. Cicero had a really good relationship with him. And anytime there was any kind of issue with a river person with someone from the city, the sheriff would come to Cicero to kind of like help smooth the waters.
He was like a good go-between.
Yeah. Which comes up what Amber was talking about whenever the first time Helen meets Elsie Brown, who Elsie Brown is actually the person that the author like interviewed to get all this information. Like most of this information is from him, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both pretty little. Helen was a little older than him though, not by much. But yeah, his dad brings him along to go talk to Cicero at one point, and they're off doing their own thing. And I think Cicero actually gives him some of his liquor to drink too during that time. So maybe he is a bootlegger, because I remember there was something about like, oh yeah, they shared some liquor together. It might not have been in the book, but it was in like this thing that I watched for the media part. And then yeah, Helen gives Elsie the name Elsie.
Mm-hmm.
And they just became fast friends. And I feel like he kind of thought of her as like an older sister, you know?
I think at first he kind of had a crush on her.
Oh yeah, because everybody had a crush on Helen apparently. But it became more like, yeah, he definitely had a crush on her, and just looked up to her because she was older and, you know.
He was definitely kind of in awe of
yes. her. Mm-hmm. Oh, one more thing I wanted to talk about with the whole river situation was I thought it was really interesting whenever they were talking about like, yeah, they just lived on the river all year round, even in the wintertime. And there's this one time where this big flood happened and one of the really big showboats or whatever, like, got stranded on land. And they made it into a bar because they were like, well, this boat's on land now. I guess we can't move it. So they turn it into a bar. And then they turn it into the post office, which I'm like, that's hilarious. I was like, way to be resourceful.
Yep.
The city people and the river people, definitely, it was like a classism thing where it's like the city people thought of the river people as lesser, which is not good. And they would call them river rats, which is not a good thing.
Now, like, here's the thing. I've heard about it where if they called each other river rats, it was fine.
Yes.
But if anybody else called them river rats, it was a problem, which is pretty true to things anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyway, it's just like a derogatory term.
Yeah.
And one of the loggers that came into town decided that they were going to call Elsie and Helen and a couple, I think John Black was there too.
Yeah.
River rats, and Helen just picked up a rock and threw it at his head.
Him. Yep.
She did not give no fuck.
She didn't, even as a kid, because she wasn't very old there. I think she was maybe 13.
Yeah.
I don't think she was very old to the end of this book.
No.
Mm-mm.
She
was
not.
like in her early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that actually goes back to like how you're like, oh, Elsie had a crush on her. I feel like a lot of the guys in town had a crush on her, but then all the ladies were jealous of her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part in the book where Elsie heard like some city girls talking trash about Helen. So that just kind of gives you a perspective of
spitting frogs.
Yeah, just because she's a river person, she's lesser than, and they're jealous of her because she's like good looking and all the guys like her. But
yeah,
they're just
are y'all telling me I'm good looking?
You are. Good looking.
Yeah, oh yeah, Sam, you are good looking.
Sam's good looking.
You would rock that little.
She
hat
knows
she has
too.
on.
Again, this is a narcissistic pick.
No, if I
She had no clue.
I was like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
She opened the book and she was like, oh.
I hadn't even opened the book. I haven't looked at the pictures, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
So I feel like we're on to chapter 2 now, and the start of chapter 2 is the sorghum harvest. Do we want to talk about that?
I do want to talk about that because I just did some research. ADHD deep dives.
I didn't research that one.
I just now did some research.
I googled the difference between sorghum and molasses.
Well, why don't you tell us the difference between sorghum and molasses, Lauren, and then I will tell you the fun fact I just learned about sorghum, which is what they're making.
Yes. So, Sorghum syrup is made from the green juice of the sorghum plant, which is extracted from the crushed stalks and then heated to steam off the excess water, leaving the syrup behind. Conversely, molasses is the byproduct of processing sugarcane into sugar. So it sounds like sorghum is harder to make.
You remember how I was talking about how maybe our good friend Cicero was a fucking bootlegger?
Yeah?
Did you know that sorghum grain is used to make
Moonshine.
beer?
Beer? Like malty beer?
Beer.
Well, I
I
mean,
feel like that would make it sweet.
You can make.
Have you
liquor
tried
pretty
the
much
sorghum?
out of any kind.
I did
of-
not try the sorghum.
It is like a sweet.
It tastes
Hold on,
like
it's
alcohol?
sweeter.
Let's
Not like I don't think it tastes like alcohol, but it is a sweeter taste.
Oh.
But you could make alcohol out of almost any grain.
I just wasted some...
It's good.
And what's it taste like, Lauren?
That'd be good in a mixed drink.
Huh. Very interesting. Anyway,
It would!
It'd make it heavy, I think.
It
It
would,
would, but like just a little bit. Like,
It might be good for like a nice winter or fall drink.
it's fermenty. It tastes
Yeah.
a little fermented.
yeah, molasses is more sweet, I feel like,
Mm.
right?
I like molasses a lot, actually. I like molasses cookies, and I know
Yeah, me too. I like molasses.
most people are like, they're old people cookies. I'm like, fuck you, they're delicious. You know?
One thing I wanted to mention about the Sorghum Festival, though, is there was like a song. There's several songs in this book, but one, it was like that Black Betty song. Whoa, Black Betty, bam! But like an
Looky
old
on
version of
Black
it.
Betty, bam ba lamb, jump down Black Betty, bam ba lamb. Black Betty had a baby, bam ba lamb, little thing went crazy, bam ba lamb.
Yeah, and I was like, hold up. I know the Black Betty song from like the 70s, so I did a Wikipedia thing. Okay, get this.
The real thing.
It is a 20th century African American work song, and I had no idea.
Yeah, I googled that too.
Sense. Yeah, because I was like, wait a second. What's weird though, and kind of fucked up, is the people from, I don't know, but the people that are in the 70s band probably are all white people, so that's probably not great. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. Oh, another story. It's like after the Sorghum Festival, Elsie gets measles. So
Yeah, he
he's
got
sick.
really
He got
sick.
really sick. He was bedridden for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that when they started talking about he was sick, but maybe he heard some stuff that he wasn't supposed to?
Yes.
So he's sick with the measles when the stock market crash happens. Excuse me.
Something about cattle in New York.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I highlighted was like
I meant to look into it and I didn't.
his perspective of the stock market crash was really interesting because he was so little, he didn't understand what was going on. So he's like in bed one night and he can't sleep. So he says,
Damn New York cows were causing problems for everybody.
he said, he heard voices from downstairs. It was mother and dad at the kitchen table. The voices changed, taking on an urgency and shrillness, a rarity in the Brown household. The boy propped on his elbows and caught the words stock market and something about New York. New York, that was 1,000,000 miles away. He got up and trotted to the bedroom, trailing his blanket. Something bad happened at the cattle auction in New York City. But like, it's funny because his version of the stock market crash was like something to do with cattle, but it wasn't really about cattle. It was about like money, but he didn't know what that was. You know what I mean?
Livestock.
Yeah,
And-
livestock compared
okay,
to
stocks and livestock.
yeah.
That makes more sense. Because I was like trying to turn that around and figure out what the heck was going on there.
Yeah. So he like took it as, oh, there's something happening with the stock in New York, but it was like it's the money market in New York, which he couldn't.
That
he didn't-
is way more clear now.
Yeah.
That just wasn't something that I put two and two together. But
I
now
didn't
that
either, to be
we,
honest. It went, whew.
yeah, I was like, what the fuck? I think he's talking about the stock market crash, but that doesn't make sense. Livestock.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because he's
He's a little
country
kid.
boy. Yeah.
I like it though when like people were talking about the whole like crash and the Great Depression like that's coming or whatever, and they're like, depression? Why, there's always a depression in Arkansas. Who can tell the difference?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's probably the same.
Mm-hmm. It got worse.
We'll
though.
talk about that later.
As we see, it does get worse, but
Things we will talk about later.
yes. So Elsie misses school for a long time because he has measles, and then he gets back, and then I thought that the reunion of Helen and Elsie was really cute because
It was cute.
the first time that she got to see him, she got so excited because it had been months.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
but before he gets better, his dad brings him home a little present.
Yes.
It's a little wolf pup.
Yep. That he named Wolf.
Yeah.
How creative.
Creative.
And that wolf followed around everywhere. Yeah. And he got really into like hunting and trapping and stuff because after he got better, he didn't want to go to school anymore. So he was like, fuck this. And he like just did not go to school a lot. And he just wandered around the woods and stuff and trapped and stuff, which
it's pretty.
His parents didn't complain about because he brought home food.
Yeah.
No, but like, so I'd like to just take a moment here to tell you that several of my grandparents only had an 8th grade education, and that was very normal country folk thing.
My dad only had an 8th grade education.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very
because you
normal.
don't need it. Like you're literally, it's like street smarts, for lack of a better word. It's wood smarts that you need rather than like book smarts at that point. You know.
Well, I mean, like my dad case, and you know, he only had the 8th grade education. He was the oldest son in a family of 12 children.
Wow.
So, and my grandfather was a logger. So once he got to 8th grade, they didn't see education as a necessary thing. You could do you could read and write and you could do basic math. That's all you needed. And he had to go out and help work in the woods so they could help feed everyone else. And that's very common. And I see, my dad was born in 1949. So even at that time, you know, he's out there at 12 working in the woods. Maybe he wasn't like the most well-read or whatever because he wasn't that type of person. But by God, he could have been a mechanical engineer. He was anything that came to like mechanics, engines, things like that. He could fix it. He could take a transmission apart and put it back together and be fine. Which
people that are good at that stuff impress me so much because that is just like my mind cannot.
Which most people fuck that up. Yeah.
So anyway,
so so the Great Depression happens, and obviously the river people have the impact of that. And so crime starts happening a lot more around there.
There's more vagrants.
More vagrants. There is a story about these 2 boys from DeWitt, which is another one of the towns around there, who were partying on a houseboat, and they ended up. They disappeared. I don't remember if they found their bodies or not, but people presume that they got killed. And there was an interesting interchange conversation between Elsie and exchange. I was like, I am not doing the right.
I gotcha.
Intersection. No, there was a good conversation, an interesting conversation between Helen and Elsie about it, where it was one night the 2 boys were on the Merry Woods, which is the boat that they're on, drinking and gambling and carousing. Helen's voice fell to a whisper, and they got killed. Nobody's seen them since. Elsie pondered this news. What's carousing? He asked. I think it's when you get a hold of moonshine and turn jealous and go to fighting, Helen answered. It's pretty bad, but it gets worse. They say those 2 dead boys got thrown into the Merry Woods furnace and burnt right up. But I thought it was funny that they were like, what's carousing? I don't even know what carousing is. Because that just shows how young they are still and how innocent they are. But
they probably, who's really fucking saying carousing over there, you know?
I mean, it was a different time, though.
They're probably like, them boys got the hooting and hollering and fish fighting and whatever, you know? And like carousing. Who? What? Who's saying that?
And there's some other examples of like more like things happening that didn't happen before that people are noticing, like crime and stuff. Which I think is a good telling sign of what's going to happen next.
We didn't talk about when Elsie got better, when he got to see Helen again.
Oh yeah, we mentioned it, but
so when he came there, she had flour in her hair, and I thought it was super cute because he says, "Is there some kind of pie making going on?"
Oh,
and I was like, that's just like a little kid.
That's just an innocent little thing. Yeah. And that's another reason why I think I mentioned it before, but why this book is so good is because like it has so much personality because it's literally told from Elsie's perspective, but also has Denise's perspective because she like grew up there. So it has a lot of personality and personal like aspects to it, you know?
Yeah. It's warm. It's welcoming. It talks about how life was, and it was simple, and it was nice.
And then things changed drastically.
Yeah.
So Mr. Worrells, Worls, he contacts Cicero to take him out on his boat to a fishing hole. Jack Worrells. That's what his name is.
This dude that they don't really. Helen doesn't know who it is. It's
Yeah,
just
they
some
don't
random guy.
really know him. He's just like a young guy. He's kind of like a newer vagrant. And Cicero's like, fine, sure. Like, you know, for this nominal fee, I'll take you out here and we'll set you up in a nice fishing hole. And so the guy goes out with Cicero on the boat, and Ada realizes that they don't have their lunch. So Ada and Helen go out on a different boat after them to like catch up with them, give them money, or not the money, but the food.
Which, first of all, not to interrupt you, but I thought that was so wholesome, and that also gives you an example of, even if Cicero was a bootlegger, he was not.
He was a family man.
He was a family man.
Yeah,
like,
it's very cute.
literally, oh, he forgot his lunch. I made him. Let's go out and give it to him.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's not a person of drama. He's not someone that attracts bad people.
No, and
This
I
was
don't
a
think
random
that a lot
guy.
of bootleggers were anyway.
You
They
know,
were
I
just,
don't think so.
a lot of them I think were just selling because it was productive and
Well,
it wasn't
Yeah.
probably that
It was
hard of a field to get
Good
into.
money.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out because I think we already touched about it, but like Helen and her family are such like peaceful people, and then the things that happen to them are so unjust and fucked up.
Mhm.
So anyway, going on, Sam. Sorry.
So while they're coming down the river, they see Jack Worrells actually fighting with Cicero. They're standing up in the boat, and he shoots Cicero, and Cicero falls into the water, and he ends up passing away from the gunshots.
Mm-hmm.
And then as Jack happens to see Ada and Helen, and he was demanding money from Cicero, and Cicero was like, I don't have this money. He wouldn't tell him where it was hidden, basically. So finally Ada was like, I know where it is, you know, I'll take you there, just leave Helen alone and whatnot. And
Well, not only did she say leave Helen alone, she said
she implied that
she
she
doesn't
was
know anything.
simple.
She's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She basically said this girl's like mentally not capable of knowing anything.
Mhm.
Which is smart for her to do because then it's
'Cause-
like he won't go after her.
Right.
Right. And that's exactly how it played out.
Yeah.
Mhm. So Ada takes him to this spot where Cicero had hidden stuff in a tree, but there really wasn't any money. I don't even remember what it was hidden there, but it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. So he viciously beat Ada, basically an inch of her life, and it doesn't ever say if she was raped.
She was. No, they do say
They-
that.
Does it?
well,
Yeah. I
There
think it
was
implied.
talk of it.
Yeah.
Well, some of the things in the book were implied, but then in this thing I'm going to talk about in the media section, they say it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, because I kind of thought maybe she was.
She was.
But I don't.
'Cause
The book was like, meh.
And also, whenever he took Ada, he took away Helen's oars for her boat and just pushed her down the river, so she was just floating down the river by herself for who knows how long.
So what he finds, the young man named Jack Worrells, had flown into a rage upon finding no buried coins, no wad of bills stuffed inside a mason jar hidden in some tree hollow. Unleashing the full measure of his wrath, he beat Ada nearly to death. The citizens of Arkansas County found themselves whispering about a subject rarely discussed: rape.
There you
Yeah.
go,
That
Yeah.
was the quote that,
So it's mentioned like one time,
yeah.
Yeah. Which is fine because we don't need to mention it a lot. But like, you know what I mean? Like, and so she spent like a week or two in the hospital in a coma,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually passed away from
Her injuries. Yeah.
her injuries.
And the way they put this is interesting too. They said when Ada began to slip away, a pair of distant cousins arrived by train all the way from Chickasaw, Oklahoma. They came to fetch Miss Edie to Chickasee.
Which is Edie is Helen's older sister.
the
Yeah.
one that has polio, maybe.
Explaining
things.
to Helen as kindly as they could that there was no future for a cripple on the river.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Edie would have a proper home in Oklahoma. The sisters made their goodbyes, and Helen prepared to return to St. Charles an orphan. Ada succumbed to her wounds January 7th, 1931.
Which, it's crazy to me that your family member wouldn't take both of them?
Like
yeah,
Edie and
that is
Ada?
weird.
Or Edie and Helen?
Well, maybe, okay, this is just speculation, but maybe with the Great Depression going on, maybe they didn't think that they could afford to have two
That's
extra people
actually a
in the
really
house.
good speculation.
But that's still fucked up, because now she is orphaned.
Mm.
She doesn't have her sister.
Helen's still capable of working.
I
Yeah.
think that kind of stuff happened quite a bit at that time.
Well,
though.
yeah, I know, but I'm just saying her situation. What happens next, I totally understand with her, because it's, you know.
Well, okay. So I don't remember how old she is, but
She's like 18 or 19 years old.
I don't even think it's that old.
She's like 17, 18.
Yeah.
I think.
Because they talk about
She's
it
like
here
high
and
school
there,
age.
but yeah, she's young.
Yeah.
She's young for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the frontal lobe has not fully developed, and we are still angry.
Oh, here we go.
Teenager.
Okay, so Jack is then caught. He is taken to, jail, and they are having a trial.
Which usually it would be a river justice thing, but since I think because of the circumstances, they took him in, so they're going to give him a real trial.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're at trial, and Helen is there. She's watching everything go on. They're getting ready to convict him, and she basically stands up. She pulls what I can only imagine is a beautiful pearl-handled pistol out of her fur muff. Is it a muff?
It is
Yeah.
a muff.
It is a muff. Okay. So her fur muff, which also sounds beautiful. And she fucking shoots this asshole, Jack Whirls,
You killed my
in
daddy.
court in
Yep.
front of everyone.
Right when he's going to get sentenced. Because also,
River justice.
you would think that he would be guilty, but with the, the city people and the river people, not like the city people looking down on the river people and all that stuff, he could have very well gotten off with this.
And there's like a lack of witnesses too.
Yeah.
I mean,
so she did what she had to do, and she fucking shot that motherfucker.
technically at this time, she possibly would not have been called as a witness due to her age.
Yes, yeah.
Even in modern time. But she is 18 at the time she kills him. So
Yeah.
That's
solves-
according to one article. That's
Yeah.
the article, the first article.
Because
that
we
they
actually don't
published.
know what her birth date is. her
Yeah.
exact
Yeah,
birth
in
date.
the New York Times they say that she's 18, but in the other one in the Arkansas Gazette they say girl 17 avenges death of father. They don't even know how old she
Yeah.
is.
So she's like 17, 18.
She's
at this
around
point.
that
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
So court goes up in an uproar. They're like, holy fuck. She's
People are crawling out windows
Yeah,
trying to get out of the
jumping
courtroom.
out.
Like, holy shit,
Like,
somebody just shot somebody.
house of fire. Okay. So they like fucking get her, and she's like, nah,
Helen's
he killed
just
my
standing
daddy.
there. Yep.
That's
no fucks
exactly
given.
what she said too.
No
he killed
fucks
my
He killed
daddy.
my daddy. And so
She showed
the sheriff-
remorse.
She shot him 4 times in the chest. He had to be behind him, like not very far.
yeah, right behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this whole kerfuffle and stuff, and so she's just standing there, and the sheriff, I forget if it's Sheriff Lim or a different person, but they take the gun away from her, and they're trying to get the bullets out, the rest of the bullets, and she's like, oh hey, this gets stuck a little bit, let me take it from you, get the bullets out. So
I
she
think
does
it
that,
was
gives it back to
him.
him. So obviously she did not want to kill anyone else except him, because he killed her daddy.
Yep.
So then she is dubbed
Yeah.
the Swamp Angel.
Mm-hmm.
Sheriff
which is-
Lim, clutching his pipe with
Yeah.
a shaky hand, was the first to approach. He tapped Helen on the shoulder. She wheeled around, lifting a pearl-handed lady's pistol, formerly concealed inside a rabbit fur muff. Yeah, I came right near shooting you, she said, handing over the gun. She followed several deputies down a hall into the side room, Sheriff Lim in tow. Once inside, Lim tried to pry open the chamber and empty the remaining bullets, but his hands kept shaking. Let me help you. It tends to stick, Helen said, snatching the pistol. Every man in the room dove under the nearest piece of furniture.
Every man in the room.
Yeah. Helen deftly removed the bullets and placed them on a table. Lim subbed up the entire episode. All hell broke loose today.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she was dubbed the Swamp Angel in all the articles, the news articles.
Yeah.
And some were accurate, some were not. You know how that shit goes. Like, people just want to read all the juicy details regardless of whether they're true or
They
not.
want to
What was
write
that
the
term?
story.
It was like
first.
yellow journalism.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm,
that
Yeah.
was just running rampant at this point.
Yes, yeah, yep. And she's charged with first-degree murder. But she was able to, like, while she was awaiting trial, she was able to.
She was like working at a diner.
She was living
like
with some other
probation.
sheriff, yeah,
Mhm.
some other sheriff's family, and she was working at a diner
In like a small city.
in a small city. Yeah, ran by. It's called Rothenheffer Cafe, ran by this douchebag called Jim Bohots. Bohots? I don't know.
Bohots.
Bohots, who we're gonna talk about because he's a fucker.
What a douche.
What a fucker. But
Bas-
before that, I need to get another drink though.
Me too.
Okay, let's get another drink.
Ooh,
Drink break.
obviously, I had a fucking meltdown here.
What did you do? Oh, you have a lot of sticky notes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Helen gets this waitressing job, and she's just kind of passing her time until her, court hearing or whatever. And she ends up rooming. After a while, she gets to room with. She befriends one of the waitresses,
Mm-hmm.
and she rooms with her. And her name's Ina Mayberry, which I think is a very cute name.
Ina Mayberry.
My name's Ina Mayberry. What's yours? And yeah, they work for this guy named Jim Bohots, who is
Bohots.
an insufferable jackass.
Dick.
That basically is a patriarchal
What you imagine
thing.
is a shithead of a man who just wants to touch every woman that crosses his path, and you think, ew.
Yeah.
That's Jim Bahoots.
And first of all, yes, gross. Second of all, these are women that are not even women; they're girls right now.
Yeah.
And so Jim Bohots, he's a turd, and he was doing these advances on Helen,
And she was like, "A fuck of you."
I forget the complete circumstances, but there was one night where he's like, "Hey, come out with me for a little bit," and she didn't want to, but she said yes because
He's like, I'm just what a dickhead of a dude. I'm just misunderstood. You're just misunderstanding me. We can clear all this up with a simple car ride.
Yep. So
Come with me in my car and I'll accidentally run out of gas or some shit.
At the tryst spot.
What an asshat.
conveniently stopped at the spot, the local makeout spot,
Yeah.
and
Lover's Lane, if you will.
Yep.
so the next morning he is found in his car with a shotgun wound. He's dead, and
Nobody
RIP.
is sad.
With his own gun, and everyone was kind of like, Whatever.
The general consensus, according to the book, is, well, he probably needed killing.
basically, because
That's like a direct
no one
quote
liked
almost.
him. Yeah, no one liked him, and everyone was like, "Well, yeah, Helen was probably the last one with him, but who gives a shit?" Like,
Kind
he's
of.
kind of a fucking twat.
And they brought her in for questioning,
She
and
was
she's
like,
like,
"Nope."
nope, I don't know what you're talking about. And this is the 30s.
Yeah.
Was DNA testing a thing? Of fucking course not. They had no way to prove it was
What's
Helen.
DNA?
They're like, yeah, sure, she shot a man in cold blood, but, river justice.
Yeah.
Versus this is
Well,
just...
this wasn't even in a river town. This
No.
was at a different town,
Yeah,
and they
this is
still
totally
were like,
different
"This
town,"
guy's
and
a
they were like,
dick. We don't care if he's gone."
Yep.
kind of. So anyway.
So that happened. Who cares about him?
Yeah.
And but it does come back into play. That's why we're referencing it.
Yes.
And so the Supreme Court overturned the murder charge to manslaughter, and instead of 5 years, Helen served 2 years.
But
And
only
then
because
she was
she
on
got
parole.
paroled out,
Yeah.
right? Somebody
Mhm.
paid her bail.
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember the circumstances.
Okay, so I did some... I think it's mentioned in here, but also I did a little
Lol.
digging. And it probably was like a prostitution thing. So basically the amount of bail that guy paid was an extensive amount of money for that time frame. I can't remember what it equated to in today's times, but it was quite a sum of money. It's nothing to it's nothing to sneeze at
Yeah.
all. I'd have been like, yeah, I could
Especially in the Great Depression, whenever
couple
no one
payments
had
toward
money.
my house, or It was a lot of money at that time. And so basically there was a thing where sometimes people would pay bail in exchange for sexual favors. It's a really fucked up thing. So basically, if they paid your bail, you were now their property. So what happened, guys? What did she do shortly after she was bailed out?
Here, I just found it. It said that W.B. Graham was a school superintendent for neighboring Lonoke, right? County during the 1930s. He paid $1,000 for Helen's parole bond, an amount equivalent to $14,000 today.
Fuck ass, man. That's like a quarter of my house now.
That's a lot. And then the Arkansas Women's Prison's practice of debt peonage or debt concubinage cannot be ruled out and may help explain what happened next. And then Helen did something that no one saw coming. She actually went back to the police and said, "Hey, I actually killed Jim Bohotz."
Yeah, remember that guy?
The Greek.
You remember
that
that
asshole.
douchebag?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. The Greek was his nickname. We didn't mention that.
Sam's not being a dick. He
That
was
was his
mentioned like
nickname.
that. Yes.
And everyone did it out of earshot, and they never no one did in front to his face.
Well, and think about it this way, like, she was in jail, and I got the sense that she kind of liked being in jail because she was, being at home reminded her of all this tragedy and all of the home that she had
nowhere else to go.
that she never had anymore.
But
so she liked being in jail.
She was also told when she was bailed out that she shouldn't go back home.
It's not that she shouldn't. It's not that she had to. She was no longer allowed to go to Arkansas, back home at all. She was banished.
That's what it was.
Which is pretty fucked up from this is the life you knew, but tough shit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like, fuck it. I'm just going to go back to jail because that's, and her time at that one jail was not bad.
No.
Not at that jail.
Not at that jail.
So.
But then
They
she
sent
goes
her
to a
the bee
different
farm.
jail, and it's not great.
No.
So let's get to that, I guess.
Yeah.
The pea farm.
Let's talk about
get into
the pea farm.
Fucking pea farm.
There's a lot of things about this pea farm. So I forget what I don't remember the official name of the place, but it is called the Pea Farm, as a nickname. And there is a Mr. and Mrs. Brockman that were she was the warden, and he did something else that, I don't know what, but they ran the prison. And then there's a dude.
Assistant superintendent.
Exactly. I am Mr. Brockman, the assistant superintendent.
I'm just a bitch.
Yeah, basically.
My wife is main bitch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just do whatever
she
tells
ran
me.
shit. And then there's a guy called Frank Martin that was the only guard at the prison. And get this, he was a prisoner at a different jail, but they let him for some reason be a guard at this jail, even though the reason why he was in jail in the first place was for killing someone.
And he was allowed to carry a gun.
And
Probably because he was so well behaved.
that Frank Martin.
Yeah. Oh, he was serving a 21-year sentence for shooting and killing an unarmed man.
So not only did he murder someone, but he murdered someone with a gun, and now let's give him a gun around all these women. Give him some sense of power. Let's do that.
Because he's such a big man that he has to kill an unarmed man.
Good grief. So that's just giving you a tip of the iceberg of the fucked up things with this prison. But yeah, Helen tries to escape, and they punish her by taking her into a secluded room and making her, what's it called? Wrapping her around a barrel.
Bending her over a barrel.
Bending her over a barrel and whipping her.
Yeah, that's where that phrase came from.
Yeah, where the term "you got me over a barrel" came from, which I was like, that's fucked up. But I also like terminology like that, like knowing where terminology comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not know that.
It's because they bent him over a barrel and whipped him.
Yeah.
They flogged him.
But that did not deter her, because she tries to escape numerous times after that. She also befriends another inmate named Catherine.
Well, here's... Okay, so she
was
gets
a federal inmate, so she did a felony.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so she did something.
But who knows what a felony was back in the 30s.
Yeah, because
That's
actually,
She seemed to have it a little bit better off.
There was some research I did in the media section, and there was one thing where they were describing the prison, and they were like saying how women got arrested for quote unquote having an unruly household and for riding motorcycles with boys. Those are 2 reasons why women got arrested.
Say I'd have been arrested for the unruly household. My kids are nuts.
I would have been arrested for both of those things. I gotta say though, if I'm riding some kind of cycle, it's a bicycle nowadays, but I wouldn't. Motorcycles are fun.
They are.
You know, so, but those are 2 of the reasons why women got arrested.
Well, have you ever seen that list circulating around Facebook? And I don't know how real it is, but like the different reasons that women were put into asylums.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're probably all true.
I would assume so. One was like if they read too many books, and I'm like,
I mean, that's why they were burned at the stake.
Well, fuck me, we got a podcast about it, so
yeah.
We should go into that too. We should talk about another podcast sometime. We should go into all the dumbass reasons women have been arrested over their years.
Yep. So, another fucked up thing about her getting whipped though is that she befriended Catherine, and Catherine, her job was to do some of the clerical work, so she had to type up Helen's
report,
punishment report, which I was like, that is such a psychological weapon to use on someone.
Fucked.
Like, that's fucked up. That's very morbid.
So here's a quote. So after the first time she gets flogged, it says, "The Brockmans had corrected Helen, but if the couple thought her spirit was broken, they were dead wrong. Back on the line after a few days' recuperation from the flogging, Helen spied another hole in the fence and escaped again on September 18th. This time, she made it all the way to the banks of the Arkansas River." So, they whipped her and she's like,
fuck it.
Al, you know what? There's a hole in that fence over there.
Yep.
As soon as she was able to, get around.
Yeah.
She was like, fuck it.
She's literally, now she has no reason to... reason to live, but nothing to lose at this point. Of course she's going to try to escape as much as possible.
So September 13th is when she ran away the first time. They whip her after she's found within 3 hours of that escape. They whip her, and then on the 18th, so 5 days later, she's like, "Hey, a hole, bye."
Yep.
Mm-hmm. She's very resilient.
And it's funny because all the times that she escapes, the description of it, I just think of her just wandering around.
Casual.
I know.
Casual. She's not running for her life. She's literally like, whatever happens to me, happens to me. She literally does not
She didn't give a shit.
because her whole life is gone.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
It is sad.
Well, they eventually catch her because she goes
from the second escape.
Yep. And because she gets to the river and she can't cross it. And they actually don't have any actual records of what type of punishment she suffered from
this is really fucked up, though.
Yeah, I was going to let you guys just fucking rant about this.
Took a deep dive on this one.
I see all the sticky notes on your next page.
Yeah.
Go, Sam, go, because you did a deeper dive than I did here.
I'm going to sit here and listen.
So, she contracted, after their punishment, she contracted a fever, perhaps from a kidney infection. She was not able to walk, and she had delirium. She basically was just laying in her cot, and she was probably septic, honestly. Yeah. It took them a long time before they actually took her to the hospital to be treated. She was basically going in and out of a coma.
So it says that her condition was alarming enough that someone at the prison sent a message to DeWitt because it appeared she would die.
Mm-hmm. So they ended up taking her to the hospital. They're trying to figure out what's going on. They give her the sodium benzate. It's used to treat high levels of ammonia in the bloodstream, which is an indication of kidney damage and potential organ failure, which is obviously deadly.
Yep. And she's not even 20 at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she's also prescribed a heart medication called Digitalis, which is every 4 hours when the pulse is above 130. Now,
Can I just say that that's a lot of digitalis?
that is a lot of digitalis.
That's something we still use today, right?
It
'Cause
is.
It sounded really familiar.
It's one of those
Mhm.
drugs that we have to monitor really closely, their heart rate, because you can kill, like you can give someone digitalis poisoning really easily.
like a heart attack.
You can kill them.
yeah. So this is I went into that.
Here's Sam's deep dive.
Here's my
Go.
deep dive about digitalis and then another medication that they mention. So digitalis is also known as digoxin and lanoxin. So typically it treats things like heart failure, atrial
AFib. Yeah.
AFib, atrial fibrillation, or atrial flutter. And it can also cause like an early abortion. So it will basically cause fetal death. So it's funny that they gave her that because a lot of the symptoms that she was already suffering from, if you have digitalis toxicity, they have the same symptoms as what she already had.
Are these the things that they're treating her after she goes to the hospital?
Yes.
So, because we don't know what happened to her at the jail,
Correct.
right?
And I don't think the hospital really knows.
But
either.
it's really weird that she's on all these medications as a young 19, 20-year-old girl on digitalis and all that shit.
I
That's
think-
fucking weird.
I think they just basically threw digitalis at her because she had the irregular heartbeat. But if you give someone too much of it,
Dig
which
every 4 hours
is
is
a lot.
insane to me.
so
it
the
will
hospital
cause-
was also not doing a great thing.
right, it
That's
will also
a
even
medication.
cause
They were probably
irregular
overcompensating
heartbeat. Yes.
things because they didn't know what the fuck the jail did to her.
Mhm.
So they were trying to help, but they also were
Well-
not knowledgeable of things.
Not only did they probably give her digoxin toxicity, they were
They gave
also
her a lot of
giving her.
morphine.
Well, they were giving her a lot of colonics.
Yeah.
They gave her morphine and colonic.
Why would they need to give her colonics?
I think they gave her something. They literally made her either ingest or they
At the
injected-
jail.
Yes, at the jail. That's something that they knew was toxic and would make her sick.
Yeah.
And that is why they were trying to flush shit out because they.
So the hospital was just trying. They're like, we don't know what the
Well,
fuck they
kidney
gave her. We're just trying
poisoning's
to.
common too in actual poisoning. Like if
Mhm.
you poison someone, liver toxicity or kidney toxicity are two of the
Biggest things, and she had both of those things.
She had
probably.
kidney for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm. And honestly, she probably had liver too.
Yeah,
Because,
and she had permanent
Poor
damage
thing.
to her heart for the rest of her life
Yeah.
after
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
yeah.
Which was not very long.
So they literally did something to her. They poisoned the fuck out of her. And
Yeah.
what's one of the first things that they do when you ingest poison? They make you throw up. They, try to flush it out of your
Sometimes.
system. So they did multiple, like 5, no fewer than 5 enemas. Girl,
that's a lot of
That's a
enemas.
lot of enemas.
you shouldn't be doing that.
Your
many.
butthole's gonna be rough after that, I feel like.
There's nothing in there after that.
Like-
Yeah, it's just
Because
like.
even if you're doing a cleansing one, it's literally just water that they're pushing up in there.
You might
You only need to
do
do one.
You might do 2 to get everything out,
Well, they
and
did.
that's excessive.
So yeah, so she had all those treatments.
Maybe.
They finally got her back to the point where she could go back to the farm. She wasn't in great condition, but she was alive and not about to die. So she basically just laid in bed for the longest time because, she was pretty fucked up. Let's be honest.
And then she got better. She went back to the jail. Prison, not jail, right?
It's
There's
a prison,
difference.
yes.
It's a prison. And then I think this is where we could touch on the whole scandal,
Mm.
So
the
with,
trafficking scandal.
Mm-hmm.
with that, let me just put in the first mention of this. Due to Helen's escape, she was no longer allowed to work in the fields. She gradually recovered her strength and began working in the prison laundry. Catherine still spoke of an upcoming trip to Memphis for purposes of prostituting the younger prisoners, but the other women disregarded her warnings. So,
I think it went on. She kept saying it for so long they stopped believing her.
yeah.
Catherine was the one that started
Catherine
being
was-
like, hey, because she was in the office area, administrative area, and hearing that, picking up on
Hearing
shit.
stuff.
She told to Helen, and Helen was telling other people, and then the other people were like, I don't know.
We think you're just fearmongers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do we have to be afraid of? We're just in this fucked up, corrupt prison. They do eventually get loaded up in this bus to Memphis.
This is actually one of my favorite parts of this story.
It's
really fucked, but this is my favorite part.
Well, because
Helen's
it
story.
really portrays Helen's personality
and
like
stunt. I love it.
her ingenuity and her resilience and her just being like, "Fuck you."
She's highly intelligent.
Oh yeah.
She's backwoods as hell, but she's very she's just clever.
So
and this is it.
Sam, do you want to tell us what
I was
happened?
going to say. Sam needs to say it.
Why?
Because you're related.
We feel like
because I
you
am
look
Helen.
just like her.
Ancestor.
I'm just Helen reincarnated. So they take them basically on a Greyhound bus to Memphis, and they stop at a bus station, and she's like, "Hey, I gotta take a leak," and they're like, "Fine." So since Helen was working in the laundry, she was stealing the gingham, red and white gingham cloths, like
They're
napkins.
Yeah. And she was secretly sewing them into her dress. So when she turned her dress inside out, or like her prison dress, it looked like a homemade dress, like of gingham.
like something off a magazine.
Yeah.
Something off a magazine.
I guess. But she walked out of the bathroom wearing this inside out dress of gingham, and she walked by them and just carried on her way before they ever even noticed the fact that she was freaking gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Smart.
what a good idea.
And the thing is, she still got caught, but what happened because of that is they did not actually go through with the whole plan of the sex trafficking thing. So she helped everyone out because they weren't fucking believing her, and she was like, "Bitches, this is what's going on." And I don't know how long it took her to sew that together, but
Probably a while.
a long ass time. She premeditated that bullshit, and yeah, she's only like not even 20 years old or something. I don't know how smart I was at that time, but it was not that smart.
I don't remember reading if they ever tried it again, but I feel like with her escaping for a third time by doing that, they finally realized that, oh, maybe they would actually, this is maybe not a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, because of that. So it's like, since they don't say...
Yeah, they don't bring it up again.
But like,
you know what?
hopefully maybe they didn't.
You would hope, but we'll get into all the demise of that prison after the fact. But hopefully that was like the last time that ever happened. Wishful thinking.
But the thing is also that was a kicker for me was the warden was a woman, and she was like, yeah, that's fine. Just prostitute him off.
That lady has some issues.
What a C word.
So
Yeah. She sucked.
So one of the reasons that they talked about this probably was a thing happening was because the prison was broke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
it's during the Great Depression.
Yep.
Prison's broke. Everyone's broke. But that doesn't mean
ugh,
you should be bad to other people. So after that whole thing, she gets sent to a mental institute.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point the prison's like, let's just give her to this.
They were
we don't want to.
fucking
They were like,
over
I'm done with
her.
her because she's just too much for us. Sent her there, and the institute checked her out and we're like, oh, she's fine. She was there for a couple weeks, I think. And they're like, you need to take her back because she is mentally well, you know. But in that time, she actually wrote a 42-page manuscript.
Well, they said that she had psychopathic inferiority, which at the time was basically just PTSD.
actually,
Yeah.
I have
Which
what that meant.
makes fucking sense.
Yeah.
You're having an emotional state. Well, yeah, I just watched you try and rape my friends.
You're just
Right?
being a normal person, reacting the way that a normal person would react in these circumstances. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. She went to this. The prison took her to this, sent her to this hospital, and then
Tried
they're
to
like,
send her right the fuck back.
they're like, here you go. She has nothing wrong with her, really, that we could like, you know, diagnose her with something, but it wasn't anything like.
Serious enough to
Serious.
keep her there.
And yeah, this is what's fucked up though. She did write a manuscript in there, and the prison confiscated it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of her family or like someone from the town tried to reach the prison later on to get it.
It was
And
her
they were
uncle.
like, yep, her uncle. And they were like, we don't have that.
Well, here's what probably actually happened. So this is actually probably a lot of the reason for her demise is Miss Helen, when she wrote the manuscript.
Manuscript. It got scrapped.
It got
Did get
scrapped.
Manuscript.
When she wrote the manuscript, she put the return address as a pea farm because that's where she lived.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who's that gonna actually
go to
the fucking warden,
who's a bitchhole.
Mm-hmm.
and they already don't like Helen because, well, she spoiled their plans. And what do we think that manuscript was probably about?
Them.
Yep.
Them and
Yeah.
all of the fucking terrible, corrupt things that they were doing in that prison.
Mm-hmm.
And she was probably trying to be like, hey, here's a light and I'm going to shine it on all this crazy dark shit that's going on in this prison. And they were like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
So they send it back there and the warden gets it.
and so they also, once she gets returned to the prison, they create this wooden cage for her.
Yeah.
And she's pretty much stuck in there. If she's not eating or working, she's stuck in this cage. And it's in
24 hours a day.
full view of the sun. So she's
No.
basically roasting in there.
Yeah, it's heat of the summer in Arkansas.
There's not enough real room to move around. She doesn't
Mhm.
have basically anything.
She's being tortured.
Searched every single time she comes in and out of the cage.
Do we know how big the cage was?
They did say.
It did say-
I don't know the specifics though, but it was very tiny.
It says at one point it was too small to accommodate movement, but then there's another point where she's laying on the ground and stuff.
So is it one of the I took a picture of one of those cages at the Glore Psychiatric Museum.
Where you're at, yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably one of those where it's basically
Oh yeah.
a lay down
Yep.
it's almost like a crib but for an adult person, except zero movement hardly at all, and they
Mhm.
confine people in these so that basically they'd be more complacent and wouldn't be. But yeah, put it out in the sun and roast somebody. Yeah, they're going to be
Mhm.
really complacent because they can't fucking move because
Gonna
they're
die
so
from the
dehydrated.
heat.
Right.
Go
And
crazy
it's
just
hot
from not being able to
there.
move. What's the worst? Being dehydrated, not being able to move, not being able to get under cover, being starved to death.
Mhm.
Well, and if you're in a
there's-
cage,
it's torture.
it's inhumane.
Yeah. And there's a touching moment because Catherine ends up getting out. And there's a moment where she goes to Helen in the cage. I don't know if it's at nighttime or whatever, but she goes to her
It is, yeah.
and gives her some gifts because she's like, I'm getting out and I just want to say goodbye to you.
I want
And-
you to have these things.
Yeah, and I want you to have these things. I remember that being a really touching moment because it was you could tell that she wanted to free Helen too, but she couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And
Helen
you know
was
she felt
"I
guilty
can't
for
take
leaving
these
her."
things," yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Helen was like, I can't take this, so I want you to take my things instead.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
At this point, she's only basically in the cage the majority of the time. She then is put back out in the fields to work. So she's out in the field. She faints, and she's like, "Hey, I need to go to the big house where the warden lives and whatnot to get my medicine." So they're thinking maybe she's still taking digitalis at this time, which is what? So she goes, she gets her medicine, but she also just keeps walking. So she just keeps walking out of the fields, and she escapes again. And she goes through barbed wire and is like, "Fuck this, I'm gone."
She's like, oh, a hole in the fence.
Again.
Into the distance.
I imagine this is her just being like, I'm gonna go get my medicine. And just with a distant look in her eye, just kind of.
Yeah, she just fucking kept walking.
Yeah, she never had any urgency.
The guards were the guard was alerted, and he was like, "Oh God, what are we gonna do?"
You mean the fuck nut that killed somebody that shouldn't have been allowed
Yeah.
to have a gun, but was allowed to have a gun?
So
Yeah.
I think that this is definitely a setup to me.
Yo, yeah. And
Oh,
there's
it's
a
100%.
lot of debate
Mm.
after the fact.
Because they let her escape.
And she was gone for a while.
Yeah, I could just see Frank Martin standing there. Oh no, please don't
Come
go.
back.
Yeah.
Hey, stop.
She also was not armed.
No, but they said she was.
They said she was, but
stole
she
a gun,
was
yeah,
not.
from Frank
They shot her point blank.
behind the ear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the back of the head.
Mm-hmm.
But it was self-defense.
But the wound,
Quote unquote.
the wound was small enough to where it was very close range,
Yeah.
but it didn't exit.
Well, they said it was a shotgun, too.
It was not a fucking
There's
shotgun.
no way. She wouldn't have had a fucking face.
He shot her with a fucking pistol or a revolver.
Also,
or
wasn't she
something.
gone for like a day or two? She was gone for a day or two before she got found, right?
It was like overnight at least.
Or at least overnight, yeah.
Because
And
she
then
did fall asleep at some point,
someone
and then-
found her
They saw her walking and they reported
called
her.
them.
Probably somebody reported her. There were like all kinds of accounts about what happened. Some little
Yeah.
boy spied her and she slept under a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Some say she stopped for a drink of water. Some say that she got reported by a farmer's wife. There's all different kinds of
But
things.
regardless, she was literally just walking down the street, and they
moseying.
came up behind her and shot her.
She was killed instantly by a single bullet that pierced the back of her head below the right ear.
Mm-hmm. A single bullet. That's interesting because she was not fighting back at all.
Mm-mm. The stories don't match
Close
from
range?
what her wounds are.
Well,
She was not
then-
fighting back, which I get. She would not. I mean, she would fight back at a certain point, but at the same time, I feel like she just wanted to die at
Well,
that
and
point.
Says they found a note scrawled in the Liberty magazine rejection slip, reportedly left behind in Helen's cell. The note reads, "To whom it may concern, I'll never be taken alive."
She never even
No,
had that.
she-
There's
never.
no way that was a thing.
No,
She
we don't
would-
even know her personally, and I know for a fact she did not write
No,
that.
she would
shit.
never have written that.
No.
Because that's
Stupid.
just silly. She didn't plan this escape. She was like,
No.
oh, here's my opportunity.
What
I'm just gonna
happened was
fucking
the
go.
prison was fed up with trying to wrangle her,
Mhm.
and they were like, "We're just gonna fucking kill her."
I
and
don't
that's what
even
they fucking
think
did.
It was just that, though. The prison needed to silence Helen Spence.
Well, yes, there's more
from
to it.
putting
There
out
are layers. It is
all of
an
their
onion
secrets.
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
sure. There's corruptness in this,
so much
way
crap.
more than we even know, probably.
Well, the
Yeah.
thing was, they fucked themselves
Oh yeah, they did.
because they tried to say one story and everyone was like, proof is in the pudding. Like, look at the fucking picture.
Well,
that
and
doesn't match.
all the river people from Helen's community, like not even them, just like a lot of the people in the United States rallied against her, being like,
For
"Yo,
her.
yeah,
For her.
or for her, yeah,
Not
for
against-
her," being like, "This isn't right. There's things wrong about this."
Well, everybody kind of came in and started giving like offers. They did. So beauty shops volunteered their service. Someone provided a silk dress. Huge bouquets and sprays of flowers arrived, most of them anonymously. Dozens of deeds to cemetery lots offered for Helen's final resting place.
Okay. First off, these people have nothing and they're offering something like this. And I know today standards cemetery lots are not fucking cheap.
No, they're thousands of dollars. It's nuts.
So I can't imagine. And then, okay, so we haven't gotten quite here, but when they do go and bury her, she's buried in an unmarked grave. I don't think she had an actual grave marker until like literally within the last like 10 years.
they're still like, yeah, because it was like a hidden thing because they didn't want her to steal her body back. Because what
Mhm.
happened was
They
they displayed her body
Like it was
like
just
it was just.
So they used to
Some-
do that with criminals.
fun art. Well, they used to do it in general.
Yeah.
They would
But-
have your wake for like a week.
Yeah, but this wasn't that kind of a thing. If you were
This was spectator.
Yeah, this was a spectatorship. So they used to do that if you were like so Jesse James, those kind
yeah,
of guys,
Yeah.
outlaws.
Bonnie and Clyde. This was all around that time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they would put their bodies on display in a window like, look at this fucking felon who
Mhm.
died by our hands.
So they did that to her, and that's the interesting thing about this entire story is
Helen,
they market her like that, but she is so innocent and not at all like that.
no.
Just because she's spunky doesn't mean that she is a villain.
So basically John Black and a bunch of his friends went into the funeral home. They stole her body, and yeah, they buried her kind of in a tree by the river, from my understanding. And John Black took care of the grave, and you know he stole flowers from a like other graves for a while
He
and
was
would put
tending
them
the
on her.
cemetery that he had put her in, but he just didn't.
Yeah. So he'd steal just on like, I think it was on her birthday. He'd steal flowers for her grave and he'd put them on it that morning. And then he would go back that night before anybody else could like see. And he'd take all of the flowers off
so it didn't
and
cause
put them
a scene.
back where they were.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually the same cemetery her dad was buried in as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much right next to each other, but no one knew she was there.
Yeah.
And there's a really at the very end of the book, there's a thing about whenever John Black, he was getting older.
Yeah.
And Elsie had not seen him for a while because Elsie ended up like moving away, having a family. I think he served time, or not served time. He was in one of the wars. He's a veteran.
He was a vet.
Yeah. Not served time. He was a veteran.
He's a vet.
And
I mean,
It's a
is
different
it really?
it's a different kind of time.
I'm like,
but anyway,
Thank you for your service to all of her.
Yes, I'm not trying
Yeah.
to be. Yeah. Anyway, so he like moved away and he hadn't seen him for a long time, and John Black invited him back to his home or whatever, like the home country. He came back one time and he was like, "Why do you like?" They were just small talking, whatever, and then he kept on inviting him back, and he's like, "Why? Why do you keep on inviting me back
WTF.
here?" And then he was like, "Okay, so this is where she's buried, and
Here's
I
the
want
thing.
her story to be told after I die." And I thought that was very interesting. And that kind of goes back to like, he definitely had a crush on her. They both definitely had a crush on her.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows if there was any kind of, I don't think that there was any kind of like, there
Definitely.
might have been some chemistry, but they were all so young and innocent.
I don't think anything happened with her and Elsie because
No.
they were like, he was a kid compared
No,
to
I'm
her.
talking about John
But
Black.
her and John,
they were together a lot.
they
Yeah.
were together a lot.
But I just think it was just a very kindred spirit type of like.
I think it's either that or like he had a crush on her, but she didn't return it, so he just like did whatever he could to be around her, but like didn't push it.
He literally just
He loved her.
he managed
obviously,
her
at
grave
some, like,
for
with
decades,
some aspect, yeah.
and then trusted someone to like take
'Cause he
on the
knew
legacy.
He was gonna die eventually,
Yeah.
like soon. You
He
know,
loved her.
yeah.
So during this time after Helen's death, they do try to charge Frank Martin
Yep.
with her murder.
Mm-hmm.
He was acquitted
Fuck
on
that guy.
a stupid technicality. Apparently, the guard doesn't have to be held responsible for murdering an escaping convict, essentially.
In short, Drylander justice didn't work out.
No, and everyone was pissed.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, they go on and, like, he eventually gets paroled, he gets released, and he goes and marries, and he has kids and whatever. And they're talking about how he developed a reputation as a strict, sometimes brutal disciplinarian, but his children turned out fine.
Ask them that question.
What? I don't think that sentence is correct, but I don't know. But he says a former neighbor recalled playing with his daughters and said it was an unspoken tenet that Frank Martin was told that if he shot her, he could get out of prison.
I thought it was funny because Martin ended up dying. There was some weird circumstances that he died under.
Yeah.
What was it? Someone like he had like a heart attack or something, and it was like some kind of poisoned bread or something.
So it
I don't remember what happened, but people were like, "Whoopsies!"
It said he died at his home after battling cancer and is buried in Bisco, Arkansas. But a legend grew around him that he'd gone to buy bread.
Yeah.
And that the lady at the counter sold him a different loaf of bread than he'd asked for. And he just didn't wake up the next morning. So everyone was just like, the river got him.
Yep.
River justice.
River justice. So he might or may not have had cancer. He probably did, but maybe he died of poisoned bread.
Because he's an asshole.
Fuck that guy. And then the warden lady, she got fired, right? I forget. They didn't have it.
Should have
I mean,
been.
they just got all slaps on the wrist.
Yeah,
basically.
They didn't really get what
It
they
was
needed
all
to
just like
have coming to them.
bull motherfucking shit.
So eventually the newspapers were like obviously putting in
Yes,
articles
yes.
and stuff. And they were one of the articles had this written in it, and it kind of irritated me. She was a fit subject for study, and the result might have been very different had she been placed with good people, clear away from all she'd ever known. She might have become a good woman.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was she not a fucking good woman just
Wow.
because she actually took matters into her own hands?
Prison from being prostituted out.
Yeah. An eye for an eye. That's what river justice was. That's what she knew. It's what she had learned forever. Mm-hmm. She was just doing what she was taught.
Yeah.
Really quickly.
Surviving.
Yeah.
To our viewers. Listeners,
I'm not saying you should fucking
to
kill
our
people,
listeners,
but,
we are not advocating eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth things. However, this was a different time period. And things were taken differently than they are now.
We do not say you should murder someone, but also, given her circumstances, I'm not surprised that she did what she did.
Technically, that would probably, even by today's standards, it would be considered a crime of passion, and the sentencing would probably be lesser.
But also it's premeditated.
Well, yeah, you're correct.
There is that.
But also, in today's standards, she should have never been able to get into the courtroom.
She wouldn't be. Yeah, no. Yeah. After she got out, she didn't have anybody to go back to.
Yeah.
Her whole life that she knew had imploded, and she was told very explicitly, like Sam said, that she could not go back to her home. And today, they wouldn't have given her that stipulation. They wouldn't have said, you can't go home ever.
Yeah.
They'd have said, do what you need to do, and she could have gone home.
But that's also, part of even today's prison, process, when people get released, there's a lot of repeat offenders because once they get out, they're like, I have nothing.
Yeah.
And you're forced to make sure you have a home, you have a job, or you have all these things, and you have a certain time period to get those things. But it's most people don't want to fucking hire you if you have a record.
So I've got several articles that I read. This one is it's called "The Truth About Deinstitutionalization" by The Atlantic. In 1841, Dorothea Dix, God bless her, visited a Massachusetts jail to teach a Bible class, and there she found people with mental illnesses kept in poor conditions and began traveling around the country visiting other jails. She found many of the prisoners to be kept in cages, closets, cellars, stalls, pens, chained, naked, beaten with rods, and lashed into obedience.
Because this really helps mental health.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she started lobbying to create asylums and helped establish or expand more than 30 institutions. Now, what Dorothea Dix was trying to do was to create a safe therapeutic place for mental health patients to live productive lives. However, as more patients moved in, staff struggled to keep up with the patients' needs, and that got even worse during World War II. Because many of the doctors and staff members were drafted, which left the hospitals really dangerously understaffed. So because of this, many of the facilities ended up looking similar to prisons and jails of today. Anyway, there's another article from BrennanCenter.org. This is how atrocious prison conditions make us all less safe. Evidence confirms that the longer someone spends in corrections, the less likely they are to stay out of jail after their release. Incarceration also often results in PTSD due to the traumas that prisoners witness or are victim to, and these traumas can include but are not limited to rape, brutality, and homicide. I don't care what your opinion is on crimes. These people are still humans, and it doesn't matter what crime they have committed, with maybe one exception in my opinion. They deserve every human right that there is.
They're still humans.
They're still humans.
Yep.
There is literally only one crime I can think of that
there's
they
so
need
many
to
people,
lock up and throw away the key.
There's so many people that are imprisoned for things they did not
even
commit,
do.
or things that are stupid, like weed possession or whatever.
Yep.
Where they're still going through all this stuff, and it's yes, people commit crimes, but they're still individuals that need to live their lives regardless of whether they did this or not.
Obviously, we're not going to solve the problems of the prison system tonight, but I thought I'd mention that there's
Really?
some...
I thought we would.
I know, right?
Wow,
The
great hope
three
here.
women
Right
of
here, right
the three women of the very rectangular large table.
The drunk ladies.
That
Yes.
really have to pee.
Yeah, I
Yes.
gotta pee so bad again.
And now it is the immediate part of the podcast. We do not have necessarily a feature-length movie, but that's okay. As Sam mentioned, the Morbid podcast did an episode. It's episode 289 called The Swamp Angel about this. And it's funny because I remember you mentioning this to me like a year before we actually recorded this episode and everything. And I listened to it then, but I forgot that I listened to it. And then like whenever you're like, we're going to do this book, I was like, oh yeah, I've totally heard about this, you know? And I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. So I was like, oh, I'm sure Wine and Crime did an episode on it, or like, and That's Why I Drink, whatever. And I was scouring through and I was like, what the fuck? Where did I hear this before? And I'm like, oh, the Morbid podcast. Like, so I re-listened to it. And I'm like, oh, yep, that's where I heard about it.
I'm going to have to listen to them.
It's pretty good. It was
so good,
entertaining. The reason why I realized I had listened to it before is because at the very beginning, they're talking about how they went to go get coffee and there's a bitchy lady that was like in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh shit, yep, I have heard this before.
It was like a
because of
standoff
them.
at Starbucks.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's why this is familiar. But that's the first episode I've listened to. And normally with me, I listen from beginning to end on podcasts, but you sparked my interest, so I listened to the middle, you know, like
Where the story starts.
yeah. So it's pretty good. Check it out. There is also something called the Helen Spence Project. It is a Facebook page that the author, Denise, made, and she also created a 50-minute documentary about it. And I watched it. It's aight. It's good. I mean, there's some decently filmed reenactments. There's some good interviews. There's some cool music, you know. It's kind of just, yeah, it's a good like student film looking thing, but it's interesting. I got a lot of like more context to the story through that, rather than just the podcast details. So there's that, and it's still active. Like, I feel like she's trying to do like a full-blown documentary, but she doesn't have like the money for it yet or anything. But yeah, if you want to like follow Helen Spence Project on Facebook, it's there.
It's a story that needs told, I feel like.
I think so, and she's
in a
working
film
for
version.
it. Like,
Yeah.
literally, anything about Helen Spence, she has literally been the one that has projected that information out there for.
She's
I feel
a
like
beagle.
she's
got a nose for it.
she's working for it. Yeah, she's working for it. And honestly, I could see this being a really good, like, motion picture.
Yeah.
Like, it has a lot of elements to it. She's a very good fucking female lead character. So,
Denise White Parkinson, we appreciate your beagle abilities to sniff out a story.
mhm.
Bagel Bill.
And you can just tell how passionate she is.
She
about
is,
it.
and I like the way she writes. It's nicely written.
Yep.
It's warm.
Also,
Until it's
speaking of
cold.
her, on her website, the author, Denise's website, there is a play adaptation of The Daughter of the White River. I don't know if it's ever been in production, but there is an entire script like on her website. I will link that in the description. NPR also did 2 episodes on Helen Spence called She Was of the River, and it was very put together. They also interviewed Denise, and it's very NPR, very like, you know, that SNL skit with the salty dark balls or whatever it was, where it's like they talk like this all the
Women
time.
love my salty balls.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But either way, it reminded me of that SNL skit. But this is a very good, highly good produced NPR thing, as they always produce good things. There's also a YouTube channel called Most Notorious Podcast, and there's an episode called Vengeance, Tragedy, and Murder on the Arkansas Delta. And it is, they interview Denise again. I did not watch that one or listen to it. But it looks okay. And then the last one was Forgotten Faces, which is also a YouTube channel. And this guy, he's so cute. The host, I don't know who he is, but he's like this middle-aged dude that just like, you can tell he does this as like a passion project where he just kind of like, he's just walking around talking about Helen Spence for like an hour and a half, just walking around the cemetery talking.
Yeah. He's actually pretty adorable.
Yeah, he was pretty adorable.
Because, well, he was, if it's the same guy I'm thinking of,
he had
he was
glasses
like,
and he had like white hair and...
I think so. I only got to see like a little bit, but he
Yeah.
was like talking about something halfway through one of his things. He said, I don't want to say it because
yes,
I'm on YouTube
that
and I don't.
was the same guy.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't want to censor, but also I'm afraid of the backlash.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like,
It was,
cool
I think
friend.
it was about her getting raped, or
Yeah, he
her mom
didn't want to
getting
have
raped,
to
or stepmom, I think. Yeah. No, that was the same guy.
Yeah, because
Well,
he was
'cause I
trying to be
think-
cautious in the way he described it so that he wouldn't get any like backlash from having to describe.
Well, it's also
traumatic
that, but also
things.
he would have to market himself as an adult content on YouTube if he did that. Because we have to market ourselves. We have to mark ourselves as explicit.
Well, of course we do. We're very explicit. I think I said fuck ass at least 3 times. That probably made 4.
We're very explicit, so that's probably
Yeah.
why. But yeah, the way he said it, I was like, "You're adorable."
He was so cute.
He was so cute. Yeah. But anyway,
I liked him.
that's all the media stuff. It wasn't much, but it was something. Check out the Facebook page. The documentary was okay. It wasn't great, but it was good. You know, for what it was. I'm glad that you picked this for this month, Sam.
Me too.
I'm glad
I
we got
liked
into. I'm glad we dipped our toes into the nonfiction side of things and the true crime side of things. So yeah, we should do our tagline.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it? I'm drunk.
I forgot what it was too, sorry.
Keep the
Shit.
pages turning and the
Drinks flowing.
flowing. There it
Okay,
is.
so 1, 2, 3.
Keep the pages turning and the drinks flowing.
Bitches! See you next month. Audio engineering, logo creation, and social media content was produced by Lauren Ranney with Ranney Film and Video. Stock music tracks have been provided by Motion Array and Adobe Stock. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Liquor&Literature Podcast, where you can dive into more details about the books, authors, and movies we cover. All episodes can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Google, YouTube, and other streaming services, as well as our website, liquorliteraturepodcast.podbean.com. Until next time, keep the pages turning and the drinks flowing.